think we're good to get started. And if people join us later, that's okay. Um, Recording has started. Awesome. So thanks everyone for joining us today. One more time, we have the illustrious presence of David with us, and today's topic is going to be pretty awesome. Um, are you guys seeing my slides okay? Okay, cool. So let me just switch over to the other screen. A little bit of house rules for those who are joining us for the first time. So since we're a group, let's keep the mics muted. Raise your hand when you want to speak. Admit. So we have a few more people joining us. Raise your hand when you want to speak. We will follow the order where you raise your hand. Recording and posting on YouTube. So if you're not happy with your hairstyle, it's okay for you to turn off your camera. English only for obvious reasons. Don't be shy. We're not here to judge. We're here to learn. So we've been in the early steps of cyber ourselves, and we wish, or I wish, I had someone to ask my silly questions to. And up to this day, I still ask silly questions, and it's all good. Like it doesn't make me less of a professional, and I believe David would agree with me. If you don't feel comfortable speaking, send your question via chat. And as usual, let's make this fun, right? So this is like that moment of the week where you're like, you know what? I'm winding down. I'm gonna have a nice conversation, learn something new. So both David and I are very open-minded and happy to answer any questions you might have. So quick intro, topics, and blah blah. So we're jumping straight into it, but let me give you a little bit of a background on what we're going to be talking about today. So David and I have been working on the background on how to properly format these sessions and how to deliver the most value to you guys. So something that crossed our mind was, why don't we share with them a day in the life of a cybersecurity professional, right? And we're going to be picking the different professions within this industry to be talking about it. So today's pick is penetration testing. I know that's going to sound pretty old. It's going to make me sound old as well, but I was a pen tester more than 20 years ago, actually 25 years ago, before it was even called pen tester. Before it was called cyber. So it's like basically I was doing pen test against dinosaur websites, right? So very early days of pen testing, but I still have a fresh memory of what we did at the time, and things have definitely evolved, and David can jump in to pitch in, but I still know the basics. I still know the concept of what a pen test entails. Therefore, happy to share that journey with you. I'll hand over to David to introduce us to this overview, take us through our next couple of slides. And the idea today is it's going to be more of a chat about the profession. I'm going to be adding bits and pieces here based on my personal experience. But whenever you guys have a question, just click on the little raise your hand button, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have. And just to wrap up this introduction that was meant to be brief, we have an exercise we're going to go through at the end of the mentoring session, just to bring you guys up to speed with what a pen tester or a pen tester does on a daily basis. So without further ado, let me hand over to David.
Cool. Thank you, Adri. So let me start with a disclaimer. So being a pen tester was always my dream job, but I never had the opportunity to work as a pen tester. So I'll rely on Adri's experience of working in that area to chime in and do all the details of ins and outs of how the actual day looks like. I've engaged a lot with pen testers, mostly being in the enterprise world, hiring them for all different services and assessments. So let's go through what we consider to be important to mention about those roles. So since the idea is to be as transparent as possible and show as much as we can of how the actual role looks like, we're not going to touch only on the what kind of skills or what kind of certs you should have, but a more like broader, like what exactly responsibilities you have as a pen tester, what your day to day looks like. Also, I added a little bit of the ethics, because penetration testers in general, they usually handle, if they are successful, some very sensitive information. They might be have access to some very sensitive systems. And in general, we all know penetration tester is probably one of the most exciting areas of cybersecurity. Everyone wants to be a pen tester. It's probably the closest one to the Hollywood hacker. So I think that's everyone, once they started discovering cybersecurity and they want to join through that journey, the first thought is I want to be a pen tester because it's the most sexy, is the one that like getting paid to hack companies. How cool is that? So let's unpack this and see what it's actually about. Next slide, please. Cool. So let's start by a role of the pen tester. So why penetration tester exist, what they are supposed to be doing, and how they usually work. So let's break that down in three main areas. So first, pen testers as a whole, like very simplified here, and we're gonna build on top of that. But pen testers, they are in nature digital detectives. So the same way a detective in a CSI environment will try to identify an environment, the pen testers will do the same for the digital world, sometimes to the physical world as well, because there's a subgroup of pen testers called physical pen test, which is just do like an X-ray of everything that the company has, and they are usually hired by the company to, as I mentioned before, to hack them and test, not just like show all the weaknesses, but do the next step and then not just do the initial investigation, but try to exploit them, try to get in, try to see how far they can go without doing any damage. So here's where I'm kind of shifting a little bit, but here's where the ethical boundaries get into place. Um, to work in in a pen testing environment, your moral compass and your ethics must be really great and really pointing to the right direction. Because you often will have access. Let's say if you are working in a bank, for example, and your job is to pen test a specific system in a bank, you could manage to get access to those systems and then get access, let's say, to credit card information or customer information from the bank. You still have a duty to, one, not make any disruption. So you are not there to destroy anything like a criminal would do. You can mimic and replicate the same techniques, the TTPs, the techniques, tactics, and procedures. So you can replicate the same idea, and you can get in. And usually the company will give you what it's called a getaway of jail free card sort of thing, which is a letter explaining what you are doing. So in case you get caught or things go really bad, you can show that letter to show like you are doing this as part of a official assessment. You are not being a criminal or anything like that. Especially nowadays, there are specific regulations for cybercrime, so that makes the pen tester job a little bit harder. I think back on Adri's day and when I started learning about cybersecurity, the regulations were not quite there yet. So we had a little bit more freedom and a little bit more wiggle room to do some shady things. So now it's a little bit more complicated. And going back to this slide, so just to finalize here quickly, you also need to have that offensive mindset. So different from a normal security person in an office job where you sit in front of a dashboard and your job is like looking for instance, writing documentation like the normal office job. The offensive security, they also have this side of the job as well, but their main core capability is to focus on bypass and overcome boundaries, security measures, and things like that. Um, Oh, we have a slide at the end with references and how you can learn more about this. But just to give you and kind of paint a picture of how far you can go as a pen tester, there is a very famous podcast called Darknet Diaries. And if I remember correctly, the podcast number 66, it's about a pen test, physical penetration tester mainly. And I always use this as an example to when I want to show people what a pen tester actually looks like. I usually show that podcast. And in that episode, the guy, he's an incredible penetration tester, and he's hired by a European bank. And the job is to get inside the bank vault, grab a gold bar, and exit the bank. And he describes in the podcast how he goes about to do like the whole detective work, understanding how the bank works, understanding what the weakest point spots that he can leverage, all the way to getting into the vaults, getting the gold bar, putting in his backpack, and leaving the building. So really interesting. Yeah, yes. Some people already know the podcast. If you haven't heard that podcast or that specific episode, have a look. Darknet Diaries, episode 66. I think the name is Freaky Clown. Really, really incredible episode. So just stopping here, Adri, anything you have to add to like what exactly a
Sure.
penetration tester is?
Absolutely. So first-hand experience, and as I said, I'm gonna sound old as hell, but I'm old, so that's okay. So back in the day when I started as a pen tester, uh, things were different, definitely, right? So the approach was my boss at the time. Uh, Imagine that at a time such service did not exist, right? Or very few companies around the world were providing penetration testing services. So just to illustrate how it worked, so my boss back in Brazil, he would go to a bank. Let's use Westpac as an example. So he would arrange a meeting with Westpac's CIO, and he would tell them, guys, we're offering a new service. So basically, we are hackers for hire, and we're going to try to break into your system. So within 4 days, we sign an NDA with you. We're not going to charge you a thing. We're not going to break anything. But within 4 days, our guys are going to spend time trying to break into your system, right? And once he got that NDA signed off, he would get back to the office. I put together a team of four, so it was four young, full of energy people. Like we liked to break things and put things together, and there is always a spare screw that we don't know where to fit it. So that's the mentality. So he would get back to the office and he would basically tell us the client for today is Westpac. That's it, right? Nothing else. So we established a process to perform the pen test. At that time, there was no guidelines, nothing like that, right? So, okay, first we need to understand, okay, what's their internet presence? And then from there, we're going to be talking about all the details of this journey as we go. But basically, the foundation we used at the time is exactly the same as it is today. Nothing has changed. I hire pen tests for a job. Like our company has pen testers, right? So I know exactly how the process works, and I'm like, hey, like I probably don't know how to use the most current tools because I haven't been using it, but the whole concept is exactly the same. So just wanted to add that to the
Mm-hmm.
story. So jumping to the next slide.
Yep.
That's a good one. So I'll go halfway and then you go the other half.
Yeah, sure thing.
David, just to share the responsibility. So why organizations need a pen test? So first one, proactive security, meaning, okay, so we need to understand our current position, right? So it's all good to have firewalls, it's all good to have EDR, antivirus, and all the controls, but if they're not properly configured or if they're not addressing the actual threats to your environment, it defeats the purpose, right? So the first mandate of a pen test is to test your boundaries, to test your security controls, and make sure that they're working as expected. The second one, validation. So usually what happens is, well, it's pretty much aligned with the first one, but what usually happens is companies need to demonstrate uh, that the controls are effective, especially if you're being audited by a third party, or even if you're being audited for, let's say, a SOC 2 Type 2 uh, certification, ISO 27000, being very, let's say, clear with a pen test. I would say if you're undergoing a certification, let's say ISO 27000 certification, and you have a web presence. So as an auditor, as an ISO 27000 auditor, it's my expectation that you perform tests against your internet-facing um, structure or infrastructure, because that's part of the business context, right? So if that gets compromised, that's going to affect your business. Therefore, sometimes a pen test comes in just to validate that part of the assessment as well. Third one, investment justification. So I like that one, David.
I use that
So
one a lot.
well, we usually use it as an investment justification. We just don't use those words. But basically, things don't look good. You need some funding to get things done as, let's say, as a security manager. So you basically hire someone to break things. And then you have a reports that you can share with your senior management and say, listen, I hired a guy to spend 3 days with us, 5 days with us, and he managed to break into, our Active Directory or our database, let alone if I gave him like 20 days, right? Therefore, when they see that type of reports, they're like, wow, okay, we definitely need to make an investment into whatever is broken within the organization. Heading over to you, David.
Yeah, and that also the point number three. It also works in the long run. So, for example, I'm currently the head of security of a company, and we have a specific security maturity and a specific framework that we follow. And if we do this consistently enough, we can see, but like Adri mentioned, everything. There's a bunch of holes. Maybe we know some, we don't know others. So the pen tester will come and will try to exploit those rows and hack into our systems. And then we can go back to the board and saying like we need investments because we found all those holes, and we need to fix them. So after we finish the whole implementation, we run another pen test, and then we can compare. Did we improve from last time? And then if we continue doing that consistently, we can see over time it's getting harder or harder for the pen tester to get through, or every time they are testing the same issue, they are seeing that it's not possible, but they might find things that we didn't even know before, or things that we couldn't pay attention because we are too focused in one bigger problem. Once we solved that problem and that problem went away, the pentesters came back and they tried again and they found other things. So this is the continuous improvement, continuous development of our system and our maturity. Also, as I mentioned, the validation could work in both ends. Either you run it before and then you see like as a baseline where you are, and then you implement everything, and then you do the validation again and again. You keep retesting, and we're gonna get that to the next slide. But usually there's three main, like in my head, the way I put it, there's three main reasons to do a pen test. One, because you are mandated by either the government agency or a compliance standard, or for example, if you are a bank, you have APRA. If you are a government, you have IRAP. If you have credit cards, you have PCI. All of those, they will say you have some sort of auditing, some sort of pen test in your security strategy. So you either forced by standards, or you do proactively, like you want to discover, you want to improve, or you want to build your security strategy, but you might not know where to start. So let's bring someone that knows how to break things, find where is the easiest one to break. Because as a defender on the other side of the fence, we need to be right every single time. We need to protect every single point. A criminal, they only need to get right once. If they get right once and they get in, then from there onwards, it's just they can do other attacks and disrupt the company. So we can do this proactive and get like ethical people that we know that they are not going to sell our data as soon as we finish. They're not going to do any destruction. So it's somewhat safe environment. Sometimes it's not safe by default. Sometimes we allow them to do some shady stuff just to see how far they can go.
Hmm.
But in theory, it's a safe environment. They are not going to do any damage to the business and they can test. And the third option, it's better to be hacked by someone that is good rather than someone that's bad. So it's a matter of when, not a if. So you will be hacked eventually. It's nicer if it's someone that will be helpful and will give you tips on how to fix later on. Um,
Hmm.
and also, if you have those sort of things, some vendors and some companies they prefer making business with companies that can provide that level of maturity, because it's not every company that one can afford, and not every company that has the maturity to run a pen test and do something with the results. So if you have that practice, it shows that you already have a decent security maturity, a decent security posture, and then that could be a difference of getting a contract with a company or not by showing that you have that. So, for example, in our organization, the one that I'm working now, before onboarding any new vendor, any new partner, any new software, even, we have to do a bunch of checks. And one of those checks is, do they have recurring pen tests? Do they have a security strategy? How they action those things? So if they come back saying like, no, we don't have any of this is already raises a red flag from us. The tool must be good, the software could be incredible, the people must be great, but they were not able to show that they are mature enough that will be safe working with them. Because if you look at the industry, usually compromises and data breaches, they usually come either by an internal person that did something bad on purpose or clicked on a link that they were not supposed to, or their credentials got compromised elsewhere, and then someone logged in using their stolen credentials, or this happened in one of your partners. So in the whole supply chain. So those are usually the most common ways to get into a business. So building that trust, showing that you care, showing that you action on those things. It could be a differentiator of getting a contract, getting a job, or not be doing business with the specific company.
Yeah, no, good point. So Emily's asking, is it difficult to get a pen tester in the first place because they are also expensive, I hear? So my answer to that is pen testers are definitely an expensive resource, but being breached is more expensive than a pen tester, right? So it's a as with everything in cybersecurity, this is a risk management exercise, right? So I rather spend $10,000, $20,000 for someone who I trust to break in and give me a report with things that need to be addressed, as opposed to spending $200,000 on the remediation itself, right? So it's a risk management exercise. So
Yeah.
just conscious of time, jumping into the next slide.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope
So
that answers the question.
yeah, jump to the next one. But before getting to that, so just another interesting data point. So Adri throw a few figures, so like 10, $20,000. So this is usually like different companies have different pricing. It can be, let's say, from 10 to 50. We can give a range.
Hmm.
So on average, this is how much a pen test could cost.
Hmm.
An average data breach and on a report from last year, it's $4.2 million US dollars.
Yeah,
And this counts salaries of people having to work 24 by 7 to solve the issue, lawsuits, class actions, software that get destroyed that you have to rebuild, new infrastructure that you have to get back up. So if you add that up, it's a lot nicer to pay $20,000, $50,000 4 times a year even to a pen testing company rather than having to pay the 2 point something $1 million, $4.2 million in class action lawsuits and all that.
correct. Yes. So Uh, quick run of a day in the life of a pen tester. So Danielle is asking, what are the basic things a PT needs to know, and how do you know someone is a good PT? Uh, I would say I'm not too sure if you have a slide on that, but basic things you need to know. So this is by nature a heavily technical role. right? So you're not going to get by knowing industry standards. You need to know how to break things. You need to be proficient at I think we do have a slide that touches
Yep.
upon that, but it is inherently a highly technical role. Therefore, if you have a strong technical background, that's going to play in your favor for sure. And
Yep.
how do you know someone is a good PT? Well, it's pretty much the same with every other profession, right? So there might be penetration testers out there with 20 certifications that are crap at the job they do. And there are people that have 20 years experience and no certification, and these guys are the best pen testers in the country, right? So Kevin Mitnick didn't have any certifications. And he became one of the most famous hackers in the world. So
Mhm.
it's just through experience, I would say, that you would know
Yep.
if a person is a good PT. So a day in the life of a cybersecurity of a pen tester. So morning, usually planning and preparation. So back to my initial example. So planning and preparation, client communication, scope definition, and environment setup. So just picture in your mind my boss coming to me early in the morning saying the target is Westpac. So now we need to plan what we need to do, right? So we're not going to start pen testing straight away. We need to understand what's their web presence, what's in scope, who we need to talk to within the organization, because pen test can be disruptive. So if something is, let's say, uh, vulnerable and you try to exploit that vulnerability, you might bring things down. So I am not ashamed to say I already brought down mainframes. I already brought down firewalls. Like it's the nature of the job. It's not a pleasant experience, and I'm very glad that I had a get out of jail card,
Mhm.
because when the mainframe failed, that was a big one for the company, right? So I was called in immediately, and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm gonna stop the test, and I'm very grateful that once we stopped the port scan against the AS400, it went back up, right? But it could be much worse. Then afternoon. So this is just an example, right?
Yeah. Yeah, what you
That's
highlight, life in real life, it's a little bit more dynamic than that. So it might not
indeed.
work as straightforward as this. Maybe there's a lot of meetings in between, uh, juggling a bunch of other things, and sometimes access doesn't work. Sometimes have some problems. Sometimes the scope doesn't make any sense. So there's might have a lot of back and forth. So it might not be as straightforward as this. But this is just an example of what good looks like.
Yeah, yeah. So another point that Dave touched upon, which is pretty awesome. So I tell you from experience, years and years of experience, it usually takes 3 to 4 weeks just to get access to the systems for a 5-day pen test. So you spend more time preparing than actually carrying out the pen test. Afternoon test and analysis. So that's when you start the actual exercise, testing systems, running scanners, running exploits, identifying targets that were not initially discovered in your initial assessment. And then in the evening, basically, you do start documenting your findings, right? So I wasn't as structured as that. So I was heavily focused on the testing part because that's pretty awesome. Didn't
Mhm.
like doing the documentation myself, but that's not optional. But you, at the end of the day, you need to document your findings, not only your findings, but also how to remediate that finding, right? So there is no point providing your client with a report that says your system is all broken. There are 100,000 things that need to be fixed. The next question you're going to get from the client is, how do I fix them? Right. So if they don't have enough skills, the image probably
See AI generated.
AI,
Sorry.
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's a bit of look, Maffernoon. Maffernoon. I didn't notice that before. Um, I lost my train of thought. But anyways, documentation and explaining how the issues need to be fixed. So moving on, a day in the life of a pen tester, and I can attest to that. So planning and testing take the biggest chunk of your time, but then documentation, investing in your learning as well. So you need to be always up to date with the latest bugs, exploits, techniques, and yeah, so that consumes quite a big chunk of your time as well. Do you want to add anything to that, David?
I will make a quote. I'm not sure if it's correct, but someone said it's Abraham Lincoln. He says like if he's given a task of chop down a tree, he will spend 90% of his time sharpening his axe,
X.
and then 10% like doing the actual chopping of the tree.
Mhm.
And the same applies for pen test. The better you do your initial steps on the planning phase, collecting information, the better the result will do. If you rush this more like boring phase, the results will also reflect that.
Correct. So back to Danielle's question, someone who prepares properly for a pen test is a good pen tester.
Yes.
Cool. Oh, yes. So essential technical skills. So I'm gonna do half, and well, you start this time, David.
Yeah, sure. So for technical skills, I think there was a question just before on what kind of technical skills you should have in this area. So this is pretty much a good explanation of the main things you need to know. So you need to go very deep into probably the main two are the first two, networking and operation systems. And here you need to go to as low level as you can. Networking, you need to understand how protocols work because maybe you need to exploit the protocol itself to get into somewhere, or you need to make it misbehave because you know that your protocol only replies a specific length, and then if you do like a package that is slightly bigger, you can break something and then use that to your next attack. So you need to understand the protocols really well. You need to understand how company systems communicate to each other. You need to understand how the operation system works by itself, how the operation system was built. And back in my time at uni a long, long time ago, I had one subject dedicated to networking, and one subject dedicated to operational system, and another one in cryptography. And we used books from Tannenbaum and William Stallings. So they are two like dinosaurs in computer science. Those books are still very relevant. If you can find them somewhere in libraries or things like that, have a look of those. If you want to buy them, I think they are still very expensive books, but they will cover. Oh yes, I think the Tenenbaum book is full of dinosaurs. So every chapter, there's some dinosaur illustrations just to show how old that book is. But those two are pretty good learnings. And you need to know at a very low level because sometimes you need to exploit something that no one exploited that before. So it's not like you can go to GitHub and download a tool or like spin up your Kali instance and you have the tool ready for you. Sometimes you have to build it yourself. So also scripting, programming language is also very relevant because sometimes you have to tweak it as a script or a tool that already exists for your specific context, because let's say there's a fire in front of it and the tool didn't expect a firewall, or they have some sort of blocking or some sort of software preventing that. And also, I think we have a list at the end with books. But another one that I want to touch is the web application. So there is a very gigantic book that I used in the past called Web Application Hacker's Handbook. It's also an incredible book that will explain the OWASP top 10, which is the 10 most common attacks, and how do you exploit them in every single situation in every single scenario. So that's pretty much the main topic. Adri, anything else to add in those six domains?
I would say as part of technical skills, I would add report writing as well, technical writing,
Oh,
right?
yes, nice.
So yes, I think you touched upon pretty much everything there, but knowing how to write a proper report that communicates the issue as much as the solution for the problem is an essential skill. So if you write a report that nobody understands, you're not adding any value to your client. So, but other than that, I totally agree with you. So critical soft skills, problem solving, so that's inherent to the role, right? So you need to know, understand how to break systems, put them together again, things you can touch, things you cannot touch, and basically looking at the big picture and trying to exploit things. Critical thinking, same thing. So with regards to uh, a system is a complex object, right? So it's a series of small things put together that work as one, right? So you need to find a vulnerability in one of those parts and exploit that so you can compromise the whole system. So you need to be able to um, not only have a wide range of knowledge, but also being able to focus on a particular problem and exploit it as much as you can. Communication. So I think we touched upon that before, translating technical findings for both technical and non-technical audiences. So from experience, if you are a CISO, if you're working with a CISO, probably not a CISO. CISO will understand more or less what you're talking about. But if, for example, you're working with someone in the company that's wearing, let's say, the IT hats, cybersecurity hat, the HR background checks hat, and like many hats, they're probably not going to be overly familiar with the terms, right? So you need to be good at explaining what the problem is and how to fix that problem. And we touched upon that. Ethical conduct, I think we discussed about that. David gave us good example. So you by the nature of the job, you're gonna get access to things that are critical to the business, and you're gonna be able to exploit them. And an intrusive thought might cross your mind of, wow, this is a database of 4.5 million records. Could make lots of money out of it, but you need to be able to put that intrusive top to rest, because that's not aligned to what that profession requires from you. So that's what the bad guys would do, and that's what differentiates a good from a bad person, right? So basically, being able to make a judgment call and say, okay, so, I think it's just your nature. Your nature is going to drive your behavior. And persistence. So how many times, and just to again illustrate the story, my boss went to one of the biggest insurers in Brazil, and he came back with the company name, Porto Seguro, for those who know it. And he's like, guys, you're going to be targeting Porto Seguro today. And we spent for a good 3.5 days trying to break in. We couldn't find an issue with the web presence. And we wouldn't, we were not going to going home. So like we're basically sleeping in the office for a day or two trying to break in, and we simply couldn't, right? So my boss left the office heading towards the potential client, and he's like, guys, I'm heading to Porto Seguro. We have nothing to show. I need something. Just give me something to show them, right? And he was making his way to the client, and as he left, one of our guys, Alexandre, he's probably one of the best malware uh, researchers in Brazil today. He's like, I think I found something. So basically, you just stand up and run to his desk, right? And like, show me. And by the time it took my boss to get to the client, we managed to break into their systems and extract a list of admins from Active Directory. So, okay, this is going to be pre-telling how old I am, but we called him and we found something. We have the list of users and passwords across the whole domain. And I asked him, do you have a fax number that I can send it to you? And he's like, sure, let me talk to them. So he tells us after the meeting, he was in the meeting and he's like, I got something to show you guys, but I need a fax machine. So as he's in the room and we start faxing like administrator password and user one, user two, user 10, and the whole list, like these people were like jaw dropping, right? They're like, oh, can't believe it happened and you guys managed to break in. So that's one of those stories I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life. But the fact that I have to mention that I sent it by fax, that tells you quite a lot about me. Uh, Ethical guidelines and responsibilities. I will let David quickly touch upon this, but then we have a quick exercise that I want to go through with you guys.
Yeah, so one thing I would like to start is by saying um, we all probably heard of all these anecdotal experiences of people like going on the dark side, like being a criminal, getting arrested, and then getting a job as a pen tester. Yes, that happens, but those are the exceptions. If you do something shady on your work, chances are you're never gonna get another job again.
Hmm.
Uh, the whole security industry is really heavily based on reputation still. So if you mess up, people will talk to each other, and it's guaranteed that your chances of getting another job reduces drastically. So this is very important. So you always have to have explicit permission. Back in Brazil, not as old as Adri, but back in Brazil, before all the cyber criminal, the criminal laws on cyber attacks were created, it was pretty much a wild west. And this is not that long ago. So no one would be arrested by hacking into stuff. So there were some companies that would do the pen test first. They will pretty much hack a company and then go back to them and try to sell a report, saying like, "Oh, I already have the report. I already hacked you. You already are at risk. So here's your report. But before that, you have to pay me X amount of dollars." This is actually extortion.
Hmm.
So, but back in the day, we didn't have laws and regulation to support us, so it was not as clear. So always, first thing, you should always have explicit permission. And same, it goes to scope. You might find that, oh, it was really hard to get into this server, but I found this other server. It's super easy, but it's not in scope. If it's not in scope, it's not your problem. Don't go there. And also confidentiality applies. If you break into, let's say, a bank and you got like a dump of a database with a lot of information, usually don't go outside disclosing that, oh, I managed to get into the bank. Their security is pretty bad. Again, go back to the reputation, goes back to your own moral compass. You don't want your doctor, for example, or your therapist going outside and telling other people, oh, I've done therapy with David, he's crazy. Or your financial advisor, like, this guy always buy those crazy things, like completely irresponsible financially. You don't would not like that. So the same applies. You don't go outside talking about those things. Also, as we mentioned before, you should have actionable recommendations. If you come back to the business and say like, your security is awful, everything is broken, everything is full of holes, so what's the point? We need to get some sort of recommendation. And also maintain your knowledge always accurate, because the market is evolving. Every day there's a new system to plug a new hole. That this system might be vulnerable on itself, or you need to find different techniques or different software as we evolve. New bugs are introduced, so you'll have to be always developing yourself.
Awesome. Thank you. So quickly running through the last slide before we jump into the exercise, which is quite exciting. Career as a pen tester. So we'll do the first two, you do the next two,
Yep.
David. Dynamic career, challenging and evolving cybersecurity path with constant learning. That goes without saying, right? So for you to evolve in this career, you need to be a self-learner, highly motivated to keep progressing in your learning journey. essential role, so critical function in protecting organizational security assets. So that pen test is not going to go away. So AI might automate some of the work, but you still need a human element behind it to understand or contextualize
Hmm.
what the problem is. So next two on you, David, and then we jump to the exercise.
Yeah, so to be really quick, cautious of the time, I can summarize in critical thinking and resiliency. So, working in this industry, you have to have those two things. You need to be, most of your job won't be hands on keyboard, like doing the work. It might be like on the shower thinking about it. So you are like doing something completely random, but your mind is always thinking what usually people call thinking outside of the box. So
Yep.
you're always thinking, you're always with a problem, a puzzle in your mind, and you have to have this kind of characteristic of liking puzzles and try to solve them. And always you need to be very resilient because everything will change in front of you, around you, under you, and you need to be ready to maintain your foot stable and continue progressing, even with all those crazy things happening around you.
Awesome. Guys, let me ask you to scan that code, and we're gonna do a quick exercise just to for you guys to get a taste of what a day in the life of a pen tester looks like. Let me just introduce you to the context. So Acme organization is well known for manufacturing cartoon props. So think anvils, fake tunnels, and other whimsical items. They're expanding their business by launching a new online store to reach a broader audience. So think Roadrunner, they're trying to expand that market. As part of their e-commerce strategy, Acme's leadership wants to ensure the website and internal systems are secure. They have therefore commissioned a penetration test before going live. So let me switch to the next screen. But before I do, so the very first step in a pen test would be scope definition, as we mentioned, then reconnaissance strategy, testing methodology, documentation approach, and then ethical considerations. So please let me know if you can see my screen. Okay.
Yep.
What I want you guys to do now is to list some of the things you would do as part of the scope definition towards Acme's website. So if you can write it down and share it with us, that would be awesome. I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, and in the meantime, just would like to address one comment in the chat. So always wear a white hat. Yes, 100%. Always wear white hats, but also you need to understand what the black hats are doing as well. Which is, I like to use a Star Wars analogy here as well. So you have in Star Wars the Jedi's and the Sith. Jedi uses blue lightsabers, the Sith uses red lightsaber, but the best Jedi is what they call the gray Jedi, the one that uses the purple lightsaber, which is the mix of blue and red. So you need to be in that kind of sweet spot in between the white hat hacker and the black hat hacker, because in theory you guys are using the same techniques, you guys are using the same tools. The output and the goal is completely different. This is where you go to the light side of the force, but you are still using and wielding a purple lightsaber.
I like that. I'm going to be using that. Let me see if I can share the screen so you can keep track of both screens. So this is so hopefully, oh, split screen. Cool. Uh,
Good, that's
not
nice.
not not great, but
Almost.
yeah, scope definition. So define what systems and applications will be tested.
What happens if you
S-
do present on the right screen?
Let's
Does it
see.
take the whole thing?
It does.
Mhm.
Okay, let's go back to where we were before. Oh, what did I do?
Oh no.
Okay.
It went probably to another screen.
Yeah, yeah. So guys, don't be afraid to make mistakes as we mentioned before. So Back to, oh, what I'm going to do is here, I'm going to zoom in into scope definition. Define what systems and applications will be tested. So we need to jump to the next one. So I suppose you guys are not too sure what to say, but what the tester can and cannot touch. Yes, definitely. Can we see the scope definition again? Uh, Let me see if there is
Maybe
another slide.
the breakdown. The next one. Yeah, maybe that one. No, no, the next one.
Next one.
The one with the pie chart. Is that one maybe? Or either the pie chart or the timeline. Which ones helps you guys more?
Yeah, let us know.
The timeline. Yeah, the other
Timeline.
one. Yeah,
Okay,
that one.
so
Yeah, not the silly AI image.
okay, so because you're short on time, I will go through these because we have four more to go. So what the tester can and cannot touch, that's for sure. Web application firewall, intrusion detection. So those are probably the systems that you're looking to test. That's okay. External versus internal scope. Yes. Web pen testing seems most relevant for the use case. Correct. Uh, would be nice to understand the web app architecture and the out scope systems like payment gateways. Yes, absolutely. So outline network, apps to be tested. Great. You guys are doing a good job. Figure out how to communicate with clients when things go wrong. Excellent
Mm-hmm.
point. Absolutely. So
Perfect.
I'll skip to the next one just because we're
Mm-hmm.
on time. Reconnaissance strategy. Now that you know what the target is and you have a clear plan of attack, what do you do next?
Also, we haven't went too deep into the technicalities of the role itself,
Mhm.
but there's different kind of tests. So, for example, there are tests that you have to mimic an attacker. You have no information whatsoever, and you have to figure out everything by yourself. Some tests they will give you information about structure, architecture, details of the applications. Sometimes they'll have like full visibility, full access. You have access to all the internal systems. So there are different types of tests, different scopes, different objectives.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's why you need to be like really great in adapting, because you never know if you're gonna get like a black box kind of test that you don't see anything, you don't have any visibility, or a crystal box on the other end where you have access to everything.
Yeah, so we have two responses so far and map everything. So my answer would be absolutely not, because you need to focus to what is in scope, not everything. But if by everything you mean whatever is in scope, yes, that's the right answer. See if I can chat to people at target organization without that letting them know I'm trying to hack them. Excellent. That's called social engineering. So you're basically calling the support and saying, "Oh, I'm having an issue with your website. Can you tell me, like what systems you use for authentication?" Absolutely. Why not,
I
right?
have a fun story about this one.
Go
a
for it.
company a company I worked back in Brazil. Again, we hired the pen testers. They tried to hack in everywhere, and they couldn't find a way in. It was a very sophisticated bank, so they've done something completely silly, and it worked out. In front of the main headquarters of that company, they had a billboard like those that you put ads. They actually bought some ad space and they put an ad in there like for something silly like, oh, new DoorDash voucher or something like that. And people working in that company, they saw the billboard and they went on the website and they registered to get a discount on whatever it was. And it was actually a phishing website, so they got a lot of credentials through that. And
I
then they
like that.
simply got in.
Yeah, I like that. Scan outside of perimeter for vulnerable ports. Again, if you're talking about outside of scope, I would say don't do that. but if it's within scope, that's fine. Pretends to buy on large scale with automated tools, DDoS. So the quick touch on DDoS. DDoS is not usually part of the scope for a pen test because how do you defend against a DDoS, right? So it's not a trivial strategy to defend against. Therefore, DDoS, it has to be in scope for you to include it. We normally do not perform DDoS attacks against businesses. And scope out the physical space. Can I get in that way? Why not, right? So if part of the scope is uh, social engineering and physical pen testing, absolutely. Jumping into the next thing, testing methodology. So how would you go about testing those things? Be creative. Don't you I don't need the name of a product, but tell me like this is what I would do, right? With your own words. I don't expect you guys to know products, product names, anything like that, but how would you go about testing? And again, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yep.
Sorry, testing regarding if the hacking has occurred, or what do you mean, like the
The
testing
actual
of the?
pen test. So now you're actually trying to break in.
Mm.
That's the fun part.
Go through using things a few times to see what gaps are there. Yes. Was exploit to exploit known
Sorry,
vulnerability.
this was me. Sorry,
I'm not too
I
sure
was
what that means.
I meant to say was able to exploit a
Oh,
known vulnerability.
right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So all AI, you can definitely use AI to automate some of the tests. I'm gonna add a few things here that might be outside of the box, but for example, Googling their website for a particular vulnerability, that works as well. There is a website called, oh my God, what's the name? What's the name of that massive website that collects vulnerabilities? I can't recall right now, but I
NVD,
can. What? Which one?
NVD or CVSS.
Uh, no, CVSS is the actual list, but there is a website that keeps scanning hosts on the internet.
Ah, Shodan.
Yeah, Shodan, exactly. That's it. So go pay Shodan a visit and see if you can find some hosts there, right? Use vulnerability scanner, absolutely right. So you guys on the money. Excellent. Jump into the next one. Documentation approach. We talked about it a little bit, but what are the things that need to be in that report so that you deliver value to your client? Hopefully, you guys can still see my screen.
Yep.
Hmm. Recommendation and actions. Excellent. Non-jargony writing. Perfect. Excellent. I think these guys are halfway through a pen
Hmm.
test career. You guys know the basics, right? So link it to business outcomes.
Perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So and what is meant by that is uh, if you pen testing, let's say Woolworths, right? So they online presence, and you manage to break into their online shopping. So you can write a report that says, I can get access to server ABC, which if you're a business person tells you nothing. Or you can say, I got access to a server that lists all the products, and I could change the price of products. That makes sense to the business, right? So you just need to be conscious of that. So vulnerability found, how the attack occurred, and how to remediate. Yes. Cost benefit analysis. I would say yes if you know enough about the business, right? But usually the cost benefit analysis and the contextualization of the finding is usually done by the business themselves because they usually know a bit better than you do as a pen tester. Explain approach taken and how you got the result to the results, recommendation to resolve, and prioritize what to action first versus second. Second, I love that. So you get a report with 100 findings. Where do I start, right? So prioritizing is critical. So kudos to whoever wrote that. Executive summary, non-tech, great. Technical details of straight line steps to reproduce, absolutely. Cyber queue chain, excellent. Indication of severity, that's also good. Criticality of the findings. So you guys are pretty good with documentation. Is there one more? Let me see. We are on time.
Yeah.
And the ethical considerations to wrap it up. So hopefully this is the easiest part. If you guys struggle with this part, I recommend you another career.
There's a question on the chat. If we put the command output or the tools that you use in the report itself. I've seen reports with the extract of the tools, and I've seen reports that suppress all this. So I'm a geeky. I have a technical background, so I do like to see it. But I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. So Adri, you on the business side of things of like running those pen tests. Where do you see this going?
That's usually an appendix for technical appendix.
Nice.
We keep the language towards non-business, non-technical people. But if you want to see the details, what I find more useful is showing how to reproduce the issue, right? Because the developers on the other side will have to fix it. So if you can demonstrate how to, not necessarily the output of the command, but the command itself, this is what I used to break things or to compromise something, that's very useful. Do not share the findings outside of the stakeholder. Yes, don't touch anything out of the scope. Keep the pen test results confidential. Stay within scope and keep things confidential. Don't misuse the information you find, and remediation steps. You guys are guns. Absolutely. So nothing to add here. So was that the last one? Excellent. We are on time, guys. I will quickly share a slide with you with a few resources for further learning. So hopefully you guys can take a print screen or take a picture with your phone of that. Highly recommend you guys to go through these book certifications and the practice environments put together by David. But that's it for today. David, anything to add?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think we cover
Excellent.
how the most sexy area of cybersecurity looks like for real now.
Yeah, the thing is
Not
from
exactly as you see in the movies, but
yeah, so the thing is for now, everything we do, everything else is going to look boring, right? GRC, GRC professional. Gonna see
now
people dropping off.
I'll make it fun. We
Okay,
can always make it fun.
yeah, absolutely. Sounds good. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you in 2 weeks from now.
Thank you
Thank you,
all.
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks all.